So good evening. A double Shana Tova to everyone. Gmar Chatima Tova. And as we stand the days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur of the new year 5772, Rosh Hashanah brings in a new energy, a new life, a new force into our lives. So hopefully everybody here feels renewed. Even if you don't feel renewed, you are renewed. So there are a lot of things happening under the surface, beneath the surface, that you may not be feeling, but is going on. So the calendar rolls on whether we're ready or not. And as we progress from Rosh Hashanah into Yom Kippur and what is called the 10 days of Tshuva, 10 days, which means 7 days actually between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, but they also include the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. So the 7 days in between, 2 plus 7, 9, and then the 10th day coming this Shabbos, this Saturday will be Yom Kippur, this Friday night. So the 10 days of Tshuva is all part of one progression, one sequence, called sometimes the Binyan of Malchut, or in simple English, the rebuilding and restoration of dignity. As I've discussed many times, very much part of the central theme of this high holiday season, on a personalized level, relevant to us, is that it's about the renewal of our contract, the renewal of our mission, and ultimately the renewal of our dignity, that you and I and every person here on this earth was recreated on Rosh Hashanah, the collective birthday of the human race, and not just recreated, but also, as I said, renewed, that each of us has an indispensable mission and a unique calling, a unique role to play in our lives. So what greater gift could there be, what greater blessing could there be than finding and discovering or rediscovering that mission during this period of time. So Rosh Hashanah is like the beginning of the process, and then it concludes, at least in its first initial 10 steps, on Yom Kippur. And then, of course, it doesn't conclude with that. It does continue into Sukkot, when we begin to celebrate this renewal and this sanctity. So in the progression of things, after we discussed last week renewal, I'd like to just talk about Yom Kippur. As a Pre-Yom Kippur workshop, the discussion about what is the role and what is the relevance, the personal relevance of Yom Kippur. So, of course, there are many angles from previous years. This year I'd like to talk about one new angle that I believe I've not discussed, at least not at length. And that is, as the title of this class is, do you feel innocent and pure? Yeah, that gets your attention. Yeah. So, of course, just to drive the point home, besides newborn children, is there anyone on this earth that feels innocent and pure? And obviously we all have our a measure of denial, and especially some people have mastered the art of blaming everyone else for problems and for wrongdoing. But if you're a realistic and an honest person to some extent, even if you do that, we all know that we are not completely innocent in this world. We made our mistakes, some intentional, some not intentional. We've all had our disappointments and regrets about many different things. And then, of course, there are people who are driven by let's call it, I don't believe in the concept of guilt, but for some reason the stereotype of Jewish guilt and Jewish mothers, and people have guilt, and often the guilt, besides the fact that guilt generally is demoralizing and not healthy, some people feel guilty even about things they haven't done. Like the classic joke where this troublemaker in class, he's always been breaking things and always doing kinds of mischief. So his teacher says to him, so who broke the window? He says, not me. Who broke yesterday the door? Not me. Who created heaven and earth? Not me. Basically a certain type of guilt where you start applying that guilt even to things that are not even relevant. You feel guilty over things that are not even your domain. Well, as I said, that's not necessarily a healthy sentiment, but what is healthy is to recognize how far we may have wandered away from paradise, from our own innocence. But above all, the fact that we're not innocent and pure, that doesn't need rocket science. The verse says, "Ein tzaddik ba'aretz asher yaseh tov v'lo yechta." Even a tzaddik, there's no tzaddik on earth that has done good and has not sinned. So all of us, by the mere fact that we live in such a materialistic and dark and narcissistic world, by its nature, a deceptive world, a world of duplicity, by its nature, everyone is impacted in some way by it. The big question is, are we doomed? The big question is, once you've lost your innocence, have you really lost it? Can you regain it? And that really is the essence and the story of Yom Kippur. The story of the fact that we, no matter how far we've wandered away from our so-called newborn innocence that we were when we were just born in this world, and before we've been trampled upon, and before we've been affected or polluted by the toxic environment of this world, can we reconnect to that? And the answer is absolutely yes. That's the story of Yom Kippur. And in a way you can say it's the story of each of us entering into our own Holy of Holies, the holiest and purest place inside your soul, which always remains intact, no matter what happens on other levels, on surface levels. And at the same time, not only does it remain intact, that we have the ability to reconnect to it. So Yom Kippur, in a sense, really is a challenge to each of us. Will you re-enter into your own Holy of Holies, your purest place? That place inside of you that is anxiously waiting for me to meet the rest of you. Because in a way we are multiple personalities. Whether it's a disorder or not is not relevant here. We all are multiple because we have different voices inside of us that beckon and call upon us. We have this voice of survival, we have the voice of selfishness to take care of your own needs first. And of course we have also the noble and the altruistic and the selfless voice. We have many voices. We have the voice of our mind, the voice of our heart. Do you follow your impulses? Do you reflect? Many voices. And all these voices, as I said, they compete for our attention. They compete for our faculties. The way he puts it in Tanya is that the human being is like a small city. And a small city that is engaged in battle. And there are two forces always at battle over who's going to control the city. The city is your body. The city is your faculties, your eyes, your ears, your taste, touch, smell. All of the other, your arms, your legs. Who's going to control what they are going to do in this world? And this choice we face with this choice every moment of the day. Who's going to run the show? Will it be your soul being the captain of the ship, and it will use your faculties and your body as tools, as instruments to express or to realize the soul's deepest potential? Or the other way around, will the tools tell the captain what to do? In other words, who's running the show? Does your body tell your soul where to go, or does your soul tell your body where to go? You can ask this question to yourself about every choice you make. Every choice, literally. And so therefore we have the different voices inside of us. So in a sense, Yom Kippur, you could say, is an opportunity to reconnect, to reintegrate, to bridge the dissonance that we all experience in this world, the existential dissonance, spiritual dissonance, emotional dissonance, and cognitive dissonance. The dissonance of the inconsistencies between the different forces that tug at us in different directions. And the only way really you can reconcile and integrate all these forces is by going back to the center, like any hub that connects all the spokes. So when you have a center point, then all the details become connected by that centrifugal point, what they call it, the point of that is a balance that connects all the dots and connects all the different voices. So it's quite appealing, actually, if you think about it, to really come to a place like that. But as always, it's easier said than done. And that's why Yom Kippur is a very powerful day, because it takes a lot of work. Yom Kippur is an environment of, in a way, an insulated oasis. It's a full day of fasting, where we try to avoid as much contact as possible with material production or with material world, simply because in order to create such type of focus, you really need to shut out everything else that is distracting. If it's just going to be another regular day, forget about getting any focus. You'll just become a creature of habit and routine and just gravitate back to your natural, or not natural, but to your customary behavior. Yom Kippur intentionally is a very intense day. 9 days we prepare for it, and even before that the month of Elul. And you build up to it. Then the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, would enter the Holy of Holies 7 days before. He separated himself from all his activities and prepared himself. Like anything, when you're going into a very important meeting that can make it or break it, a key moment in your life, a defining moment. So yes, if you enter without any preparation, without any homework, something may happen, but it's a far different story if you prepare yourself. So Yom Kippur is really this intense day that has all these opportunities I'm describing, the opportunity to reconnect to the purest place inside yourself. But as such, the more you prepare, the more you, so to speak, walk away or wash away the baggage of the past, the more powerful Yom Kippur will be. So that's why we're here. So we don't just fall into Yom Kippur unprepared, but you go in with knowing where you're headed, with your eyes open, and understanding the power of the day. So yes, this Friday evening, just 2 days, Thursday, tomorrow night, and then Friday, 2 nights, will be Kol Nidre, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar. Kol Nidre still remains in the consciousness, as Yom Kippur does, even of the most secular Jews. As I've mentioned many times, Kol Nidre is even the first song ever sang in a Hollywood movie. In the soundy movies, the first sound movie was The Jazz Singer with Al Jolson, and the first song sung is Yom Kippur. Some say it's part of the Jewish conspiracy to take over the world. Some say the whole Hollywood is a Jewish conspiracy of counter-establishment that's become establishment. Some blame Jews for jazz, for rap, for all the movements that went against the mainstream. I don't think that's such a bad thing. Some even say Steve Jobs, Olav Shalom, had some Jewish blood. And I should mention, because I just heard right before this class, that he just passed away. Yeah. And I'm sure there'll be headlines everywhere. Some say he's a man that reshaped and changed essentially the course of the world. And he's an example, actually, especially when you hear his commencement speech at Stanford, and things that he said, where he talks about living a life like it's the last day of your life. So this is the last day today. And the 10 days of Tshuva, interesting. Now, whether Jewish or not, that's not the point. The point is it's a universal sense, because what I just described, Yom Kippur, about reaching the purest place and actualizing our potential, is a universal message for all people. As a matter of fact, it even says in the Medrash that had the anti-Semites and the enemies of Jerusalem and Israel known how many blessings they benefited from the Holy Temple, not only would they have not have destroyed it, they would have surrounded it with legends of armies to protect this holy place. So from a Jewish perspective, the truth is Yom Kippur brings blessings to the whole world. It's not just a Jewish thing. It's a light unto nations, it's universal messages, and so on. And yes, and Steve Jobs in many ways, even though I call it spiritual, but some did see him as a spiritual person. The fact is they're able to challenge the status quo, think out of the box. Some even attribute some of his initial abilities to some of the, let's call it, conscious changing, altering experiences that he had in the 60s, which was not necessarily through Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah, but different means. And yes, some do associate the computer revolution to the drug revolution, and one of the leftovers of the challenges in the 60s to the status quo and to mainstream thinking. But however, his legacy will go down. I just wanted to mention it because it's definitely an inspiration in many ways, that when you set your mind to things, you can do unbelievable stuff. And beyond the commercial and the marketing side of Apple and iPad and iPod and this and that, there are lessons you can learn from Steve Jobs. He also was kicked out of Apple. So about rebounding and rebouncing and coming back stronger than ever. To me, these are very similar messages to Yom Kippur, which is the birth of hope, and even after things break, you can rebuild. I'm not trying to turn him into a martyr, just saying they're lessons of everything, and since, as I said, I just heard it, everything's Ashgacha Pratis, so I'm sure that lessons can be learned. And above all, the lesson that we all have enormous potential. And when you set your mind to it, you can do unbelievable things. And today, in an interesting way, it's usually the contrarians that are really changing the world. I mean, the latest line that you hear, I think the Google guy said that there are 4 horsemen running the world today. Amazon, Apple, Google, and Facebook. They're probably more powerful than Washington, which is pretty impotent lately, maybe always, and so on. But however you look at it, the world is definitely technology, which frankly is only a tool. That's what's so, in a way, ironic. It's only a tool. It's like a fancy tool chest. Technology does not in itself have vision or morality or spirituality. It's neutral. It's just a very, very powerful tool chest that can distribute and can reach and can transcend time and space in ways that are unprecedented. So I know it's how we use this tool chest. So one thing you can learn from Jobs is, he maximized potential, his own, and ability to think intuitively and create machines that became like an extension of our natural instincts. That itself is quite brilliant. And I will have to look at my little granddaughter, who younger than 2 years old, using a iPad and rolling faster than anything, second nature, because it's intuitive in that type of sense. Again, this doesn't say whether it's good or bad, but it's a tool, and if it's used for good things, it can do tremendous things. If it's used for bad things, unfortunately, also can be very destructive. So that's our lessons. But going back to the Yom Kippur theme, our purity, I want to talk about this reconnection, this entering into your own Holy of Holies. So let's start with maybe the key point of all. It all comes down to what we believe in ourselves. There are things that resonate. When, for example, someone says to you that, like I mentioned before the question, are you innocent? Have you lost your innocence? So the honest answer most people would give is, yes, I have, in some way or another. Now, on one hand, that can make you cry, and it can be sad. But on the other hand, it's also an honest assessment. Instead of just living in la la land, or in fantasy or denial, you're aware. And that's why the Arizal writes, well, it says the Kisvei Arizal, he didn't write it actually, he said it, but his writings, that his student Reb Chaim Vital wrote down, that someone that doesn't cry in these 10 days of tshuva, their neshama is not complete, their soul is not complete. So he says, Misha eina boiche b'asayis tshuva, neshmase eina shlema is the expression. Someone who does not weep during the 10 days of tshuva, his soul is not complete. Now he's not saying that as a criticism or a punishment or negative thing. It's a statement of fact. It's an observation. Why? Because when a person is sensitive, they cry in certain situations. Since these 10 days, as I described last week, 2 weeks ago, is the kiruv hamoyer el hanitzutz, as I said. The luminary gets close to the spark. If you think of your soul as a small little flame, and it orbits all year round, and during Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and the high point of Yom Kippur, the end of Yom Kippur, it comes very close to its source. So we know when a flame comes close to a larger flame, it will always be tugged. The force of the gravitational pull of the larger flame will affect the smaller flame. You see many even science fiction movies are built on that principle, where the mother alien or something, or the mother ship is able to affect its babies. So there's some type of power that happens. There's some type of extra sensitivity that takes place during these 10 days. So that's why the Arizal says someone who doesn't weep means that there's some block. Someone that does weep, it's like sensitivity. It's a sensitivity. These are not tears of sadness or of pain or loss. These are tears of awareness. And like we sometimes just burst out into tears for no apparent reason. The tears of awareness, of sensitivity, sometimes just feeling the disconnect, feeling the pain of life in general. There are those moments. Those are very healthy type of tears, because they're tears of sensitivity. They're tears of awareness. And that's the period we're in right now. So there are things that resonate. The next thing that resonates is not just the tear part, how distant we may be, is also the other side. When someone talks about your purity, about your Holy of Holies, about the essence of who you really are, you know that the child that you were once, your inner child, the child that you were born into this world, before it became jaded, before it was impacted by parental attitudes, social attitudes, media, all the stuff that inundates us as we speak. That pure part, is when something touches you there, you know that it's real. Not even a question of proving it. Sometimes it's music that does it. Now you hear a song, it just touches you in a deep place. Sometimes it's something you read, something you hear. Or as I said, it can be just walking in the street and something strikes you. That shows, that just demonstrates that it's alive. That pilot flame is alive. The problem, of course, is that we don't feel we have the power to initiate accessing it. It happens when it happens. Usually by accident. You travel somewhere, you see something, you watch something, a movie, you read a book, you meet someone, and it triggers it, and you suddenly feel that type of inner connection. Something touches you. Yom Kippur teaches us that it's not something you have to wait for a random grace from heaven, but it's something that we can initiate. You can actually enter into your Holy of Holies if you do the right moves, and you prepare yourself, and you are ready to enter that place. And of course, it also teaches us that you don't have to do it only in Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is in full glory, full intensity, but it's something you can reach all the time. So the first step, of course, is to talk about this pure place, because you're not going to reach something unless you have some common denominator. You need to have some way, some language. It always struck me when I first started reading in the early 70s, John Bradshaw and some of the other psychologists who talked much about the inner child. So a lot of their discussions and different workshops and different therapy in person accessing that inner child. So around nurturing your child, learning how to speak to your own child. And I've seen different type of workshops, even people even writing, even almost like doing things that a child would understand, a coloring book, simple things that are not that sophisticated to reconnect to that innocent, pure place. What struck me when I read and I was exposed to some of these techniques and methods that are relatively last 20, 30 years, and they do work, they've helped people, even writing a letter to your child, for example, and other stuff like that. I'll mention some of it. What really touched me was that this resonated because it was like, to me, basic. It was ABC psychology, Jewish psychology, that goes back thousands of years. When you read in the Torah about why we should teach our children at a Seder table when they ask a question, all this discussion of parent and child, and you find it throughout the Torah hundreds and hundreds of times. Not only in the Bible regarding certain mitzvahs, or like in the Shema we say, V'shanamtam levanecha, teach your children, instruct them, or when they will ask you, but you find it in the prophecies, the analogy of the child. Even in Rosh Hashanah, in the Haftarah, the second day, we talk about Haben Yaakov li Ephraim, this child of Ephraim that is so dear and close to me. All these analogies of children, when you read it, even on a simple level, it's all about connecting to that type of inner voice. So the first and most important thing is to identify that part inside yourself, because to enter into the Holy of Holies and to connect to a pure place, as I said, the more information you have, the more it resonates, the more you can access it. And the interesting thing is that to do so, it doesn't really require so much work to access it. It really requires more work to get rid of the blocks that don't allow you to access it. One of the reasons song and music has such an impact on us is because it really comes in under the radar and is able to get beyond and all the forces that hijack your senses. So let's say if you're busy at work, struggling to survive, or you're distracted, when you hear a song that touches you, suddenly it's able to get through the whole turbulence of your life and just cut through it all and touch some part of you. Of course, if you're listening and you're open to it, you can also block out the music and song, but it's just as an example. So the fact is like this, that a newborn child doesn't have turbulence because they've not developed any attitudes. There's no ego there. They don't have connections. They don't don't have bank accounts, don't have any preferential soap operas, and other type of preferences of what they like to wear or watch, or what brands they use. They don't even have teeth, so there's no even choice of toothpaste yet. Even that, and definitely not other matters. They're very pure. What do they eat? They eat the basic foods. If a child is natural, being fed, nursed, so it's natural food straight from her mother or his mother. Similar to, not exactly similar, but almost similar to the 9 months in the mother's womb, where there's no turbulence. As soon as we begin to experience the world around us, things start growing on us. Some kinds of extra stuff. So if you're to look at a child in its purest form, think of it as I often use the example as freshly fallen snow. You wake up early in the morning, you see freshly fallen snow, it has that purity. It came from heaven, a gift from heaven. No one's yet walked on it. Dust hasn't gathered. It has that type of pristine nature that just is very, very pure. And in general, you'll see that we all gravitate to pure things. Something about purity that immediately attracts a person, because there's so few things that are pure. Now, of course, that they sell us pure orange juice, and pure, as Walter Matthau said, authentic imitation leather. We have all kinds of pure, and even pure and innocent are also like brands today. But I'm not talking about the selling part. I'm talking about something that's truly pure. Similar to when you go to nature, and you walk into a wood, into a forest, or into a wilderness that has not been walked, that's not fabricated, that's not man-made. Not Central Park. Even though Central Park has a serenity to it relative to the city. But a real, untouched place by human beings, there's something very beautiful and very touching to us, because it's a place that you're walking in a place that humans have not yet contaminated, or humans have not tread upon. And even, I remember as a kid, in the summers, you get lost in the woods, or you don't get lost in the woods, you walk in the woods. So of course, as Robert Frost said, there's the road everyone travels on, and there's the road less traveled on. And then there are roads that aren't traveled at all. There's something about like walking down a path that nobody has ever walked. There is no path. Just crackling twigs under your feet and just charting a new course. Now that this course, I'm giving simple examples. Obviously, it takes a lot more than that to really be a pioneer. But there's something about pure things and innocent things that are not affected by by our man-made structures that resonates with everybody. It's interesting that Arizal, I mentioned, the Baal Shem Tov, for some reason they didn't like synagogues so much. Now they had their synagogues they went to, but I guess it was the man-made structures. I remember, when was it, 10 years ago, how many of you have been participated, joined me one of these camping Shabbaton retreats in the summer? Mark, I know you did. Okay. So I remember the first time I was invited, so I'm a New Yorker. I've always slept in a bed with a mattress and a pillow and with a roof that was not leaking, thank God. So the first time someone said, why don't you come for a weekend Shabbos to Woodstock? And I said, and where are we going to stay? We're going to camp out. So the first thing that reminded me, yes, when I was 8 years old, I liked to go to overnight camp thing, and even though in the morning you wake up, or you don't wake, or you're up all night, and you're like covered with soot and the whole overnight experience. But that's when you're 8, not when you're like 28 or 38. And I said, well, I'm not a camper, please do me a favor. But one friend of mine insisted, so I said, you know what? I think they challenged me, which always works for me at least. And I ended up going. And to my amazement and surprise, it was quite interesting. Again, it wasn't as comfortable as your own bed, and the weather was beautiful. But I remember they set me up in some tent, the edge of a mountain. There's a mountain there. What is the mountain called? It'll come to me in a moment. And in the tent, they made it as comfortable as possible. The real veteran campers there, etc. And around 5:30 in the morning, I wake up, Shabbos morning, to the sound of flutes, like flutes, beautiful music. So I said, what is this? I like the flutes, but I didn't think it was appropriate for them to wake me up with flutes on Shabbos. But so I look outside, there's no one around. So where are these flutes coming from? And I realized where they put me intentionally was a place where the winds in the morning, for some reason, when they go through these mountains, they sound like flutes. It was like the music of the natural music. And there are places like that. That's how it was. I mean it, seriously. It wasn't a particular tune, if you're wondering. But it was definitely symmetrical and pleasant to the ear. You don't experience these things as a city boy. And again, there were plenty of discomforts, per se. But I realized davening outside under a large tent, without man-made structure, it had a very powerful bonding effect on the people. In a way, you're exposed to the elements, so it connects you. You're dependent more on human relationships and support of each other. There's nowhere to hide. There's nowhere to run. And all this I was analyzing, of course, but I was taking it in. And then I went again next year. And then after a few years, more and more people started coming, so we had to turn it somewhat into a little more organized. And it was quite amazing. It was very difficult to do, trust me, the logistics and all that. And then I used up all my favors in heaven, so it started raining. The first few years it didn't, to rope me in. Once I was hooked, it started raining. And when I said raining, some of you can testify, I don't mean just raining. We're talking about had God not promised Noah there wouldn't be another flood, I remember very clearly Stan. It was quite hilarious, actually. Remember Stan Mitrani? Oh boy, this guy was something. He was like a real veteran, knew everything. He could survive like in the wild for his entire life. So I remember it was raining. It was a good forest cover. You see how rain works in the forest, a lot different than rain with his man-made structures, by the way. It's much easier to deal with rain in the wild than it is where, there's a lot of concrete and stuff like that. There's no flooding in forests, basically. So I remember he came over to me, he saw I was concerned. So he says, don't be concerned. I said, why not? He said, because we have the ability to transport everyone out of here up to 9 inches of rain. So he was like telling me I shouldn't be concerned in case for whatever reason it gets to 9 inches flood, we have the way out. So I said to him, what happens if it's more than 9 inches of rain? He says, don't worry, that hasn't happened since 1872. I'm just giving you an example of a different type of language. But to go back to Yom Kippur, I'm not leading up to a camping Yom Kippur experience. That's not. But I learned things. You learn things when you see, the idea of purity. You see how addicted we are, and how dependent we are on man-made structures. So don't get me wrong. There are many, many, many gifts of our progress and the homes we live in and the comforts we have. Once upon a time, they didn't have sewage and didn't have electric lines and didn't have water lines and all that. There's no question we live in a more comfortable, easier world, and we can use our extra time to do better things. But there's something about purity and innocence that touches us. And a newborn child, as I said, doesn't have all these needs, doesn't even understand what's called technological progress. So there's a part in us, my point being, that resonates when we hear about this pure place. And true study of Torah, as I understand it, is helping a person cultivate and become familiar with your purest part. That's really what it's all about. So we have all these mitzvahs, which really are connections. They're connections to the purest you. Just to give an example. When do we learn to become takers? So you can argue that a newborn child is a taker. Doesn't give anything. A child is dependent on its parents for food, for protection, for shelter, and so on. But a child is not a taker deliberately. That's part of the natural process because God created it that way, that a child is dependent on someone else to nurture it. A child is not a parasite in the natural sense. When do we become takers? When we get a little older, and whether it's due to our insecurity or due to other factors or due to examples around us, we start realizing I have to take care of my needs, and my needs may contradict another person's needs. But in truth, one of the things the Torah teaches us that your purest part in you really is a giver, not a taker. And I can go through a whole list of personality features that would describe what you are like in your purest place. And then you could look at what you're like, where have you wandered to. So great, and not only an excellent exercise in life in general, but definitely pre-Yom Kippur, is to try to juxtapose who you really are and what have you become. What features in your personality, what aspects of your behavior are the real you, and what are superimposed, acquired, for good or for bad, through your life's experiences. Now, in therapy or in any other type of introspection, the difficulty is nobody knows what your pure side looks like. So all you can do is really work backwards. You can say, okay, here's what I do. I have a lot of fear inside of me. I'm obsessive. I get nervous. I'm angry, anxious. So even in the best therapeutic environment, in the best type of personal growth and self-growth, would be, okay, let's identify that. Let's try to understand why you react that way. And either behaviorally or therapeutically, try to undo it or modify or change or pick up on the signals that when you're getting anxious, do some things to stem it, to nip it in the bud. So basically you work from your existing tools, try to see which of them are destructive or paralyze you or in some way impede your ability to make a move, and work it through. The additional aspect that Judaism adds, and specifically based on the axiom and the assumption that God created us, and Rosh Hashanah, is that you can also get an image, a snapshot of what your pure side looks like. So in addition to looking at what's not working in your life, you actually can juxtapose it over what you are really meant to be. And the best example that's why I use the example of the child, is because the newborn child that you were once is that entity. It's the way God crafted you and shaped you before anyone touched you. When I say touched, I mean in the sense, I don't mean necessarily inappropriately, I mean anything human, anything this world touched. So a neshama, a soul in its purest form, has a particular look. When you learn especially the inner parts of Torah, called Pre-Yom Torah, Kabbalistic teachings and Hasidic writings, Hasidic teachings, actually Hasidus is Kabbalah, contemporary Kabbalah, you get a snapshot of what that pure side looks like. So you may be familiar with something I've said many times, and it's definitely discussed in the book 60 Days, the workbook I did for the High Holidays, Spiritual Guide to the High Holidays, that Yom Kippur has 5 prayers. Only day of the year when we have 5 prayers, corresponding to the 5 levels of the soul. 5 dimensions of the soul. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yechida. So Nefesh is biological life, just the mere fact you breathe, your heart is beating, functioning. It's minimum. But no one would say, I'm really alive just if you're biologically alive. So you have a next dimension called Ruach, emotional life. Where you feel, you love, you empathize, and so on. Then there's the third dimension of the soul called Neshama, which is intellectual. You think, you can conceptualize, you can abstract, you can reflect, you can be idealistic. Then there's a fourth dimension called Chaya, which is the transcendent, meaning that you can transcend your own nature. You can transcend your habits, your patterns, your temptations. Not only in a negative sense, transcendence. You can transcend earth. You can fly, you can soar. Your spirit can soar to greater places. That's 4. And then finally the 5th, and that's the unique part of Yom Kippur, Yechida. So when the Torah defines Yom Kippur, it says Achaz Bashana, twice in the chapter Tetzav at the end. When the first time Yom Kippur's talked about it twice, more than twice, but twice in the Torah, very specifically. One at the end of Tetzaveh, where it talks about the laws of bringing the incense, the Ktoros, which was a specific service done in Yom Kippur. And then later, Parsha Achrei, where God tells Moses to tell Aaron, B'zeis Yovei Aaron ala Kodesh, here's how you shall enter the Holy of Holies, not like your sons who were killed in entering, and so on. Yom Kippur is also mentioned, obviously, in the chapters that talk about the holidays. But those are 2 key places. So the first time it's described says, Achaz Bashana, once a year. Once in a year. So the word Achaz doesn't just mean once a year. Shavuos is also once a year. So is Pesach. So is every holiday is once a year. There may be a holiday of 7 days, 8 days. But it says Achaz Bashana only by Yom Kippur, because Yom Kippur is radiates the level of achas, of oneness. Or, in the language of the Medrash and the Epinimius Torah, the inner Torah, Yechida. Yechida means oneness. Yechida liyachdecha, oneness. So, beyond transcendence is the transcendence of transcendence, is Yechida. The fifth and innermost dimension of the soul. So all year round, Jews pray 3 times a day. Shachris, Mincha, Ma'ariv. Morning, afternoon, evening service corresponds to Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama. Because those are our conscious faculties. Those are the conscious forces of our soul at work. We can access that any time of the year. Then comes Shabbos and holidays. Like Rosh Hashanah, for example, there's an additional prayer, Musaf, which means additional. This also accesses Chaya, transcendence. So Shabbos and holidays is more than just a regular weekday. Here you can go into a more unconscious level, but not the ultimate. And once a year, Achaz B'Shana, Yom Kippur, we have the 5th additional prayer, Ne'ilah. That final prayer that comes right before sundown, concludes with sundown, and goes right into the end of the Yom Kippur service, when all the gates are open, and we conclude it with the Shema and that whole high point, blow the shofar and so on, right at the end of the day. So it's like it grows. So Yom Kippur grows like anything, like I mentioned before, you can't just jump into the Holy of Holies. It's a process. It's a process that we begin the evening of Kol Nidre, prayer 1, prayer 2 in the morning, Musaf, Mincha, and then finally the 5th and final prayer. So in a psychological and emotional and spiritual sense, it's a journey through the 5 dimensions of your soul. And that purest form is Yechida, and there's descriptions for it, what it looks like. Obviously it doesn't have the same look and feel as material entities, so you can't use the same eyes and ears and taste, touch, and smell to experience your soul. But if you use your soul tools, you can absolutely experience it. Which is why Yom Kippur, as I mentioned earlier, requires those 5 inuyim, the 5 different things we prevent ourselves from doing: eating, drinking, of course, washing ourselves, different things that connect us to the material world. It says it's in a way to separate ourselves from our material obsessions and material addictions. Yom Kippur asks us to just, as much as possible, to be angelic in a sense. Now, there's nothing wrong with eating. If there was something wrong with eating, we wouldn't eat all year round. Eating can be turned into a mitzvah too. But one day in the year, you want to access that purest part, you have to somewhat free yourself from the things you do that you're accustomed to do. And that's why Yom Kippur is a day you spend as much time as possible in the synagogue. The point is to shut out as much of the turbulence, as I mentioned, the outside disturbances and distractions that we're usually accustomed to create an environment, an oasis, where Yechida can emerge. And that's the operative word, emerge. Similar to what I've said many times, what Michelangelo said when they asked him, how do you sculpt those beautiful images? So he said, I see the angel trapped in the marble, and I carved and set her free. Yom Kippur is the ultimate angelic experience, even more than angelic, a soul, is to be able to access the angel within. You have to carve away the marble or the concrete or the other substances that trap us. And that's all the trappings and all the superimposed attitudes and experiences that have shaped us. Now you can't just get rid of it. It doesn't work that way, because it's taken a while. Once that crust has grown on you, it's part of who you are. But you can do is one day suspend as much as possible of it to try to access and see a little more, have a glimpse of what you're like in the Holy of Holies. So in a way, Yom Kippur, the ultimate experience would be is like looking yourself in the mirror as you were when you were just born. That would be optimal. If any of you can achieve that, you'll be in good shape. And then, of course, the hard work will be, how do you reconnect that to the rest of you? But even getting a glimpse of something like that is also quite powerful. So what does it look like, this Yechida? As I said, and when you hear it and when you describe it to yourself or from someone else, what happens is it resonates. That's how you know it's real. Because remember, nobody can actually show you a picture of what you're like in that purest place. So how do you know it's you? How do you know it's pure? Because it resonates. That's why I elaborated before the things that resonate in our lives. The pure, the freshly fallen snow, certain music and songs, things we read, nature, anything that has something in it that is unbelievably powerful. I remember as a teenager, it just comes back to me now more than, for some reason I may have forgotten it, but I remember one summer, because my father's work and so on, decided not to go far away from the city to mountains where others went. My parents rented a type of, I guess, a house near Bell Harbor, which is like Rockaway. You go down Brooklyn to Seagate is to the right, Rockaway is straight over the Marine Park Bridge there, and it's on the water. So I remember I didn't always come there every night, but sometimes I would come to my parents, see them. At night I would walk over to the ocean, Atlantic Ocean. And this is something I'm sure all of you have experienced one way or another, but I'm just giving you my personal experience. And I was at that age, your impressionable age, like 17 or whatever, 18, and you're like, first time you're really thinking about the infinite and about beyond and that which is not visible and not tangible. And I remember the ocean, its relentless striking of the waves, endless. You know, the little part of you that always thinks that, you know what, maybe when I walk away it's going to stop, the waves will stop coming in. But then you stay enough hours, you realize it doesn't go to sleep. And it was for me a first time I really experienced in a very tangible and real physical way something that is infinite. Now, is it infinite in the pure sense of the word? No, but later I studied this in the book. There's the Akedah Yitzchak, a great Kabbalist in the Middle Ages, and later elaborated upon in some of the Hasidic discourses. He talks about the concept of lo yushbesu, things that are just never stop. You know, the fact the sun rises in the morning, you can predict it like a clock, and sets in the evening, and the moon, and all the whole celestial bodies, and the ocean as well, the relentlessness of it. You know, it teaches you the ability of something that just persistently has that type of power that never stops. And it had a very deep impact on me because I sensed the power that we can access, that is unstoppable, unwavering. And it was for me a good example that till this day of what it means to be completely committed to something. Now, in human life, mortals, you can say we're really not absolutely committed to anything because we're humans. You know, one day you may get sick, God forbid. We all face mortality, and we all have issues, other limitations. We can't just fly and reach the heavens themselves. But there's another part that everyone here, I'm sure, identifies with when William Blake writes, you know, infinity in the palm of your hand. It resonates. Something resonates about it. That you can have a little experience that seems so minuscule that can change all of existence. You know, you see it especially in definitely with children, how the attitudes of parents with children, small little acts, can change the course of history for good, and unfortunately also for bad. It's what happens when we get a little older. We become more callous, so we don't necessarily always sense the significance of small things. You know, then we start becoming more influenced, something that's very dramatic, fireworks, externals. But there is a point in each of us, everyone has this element, where something happens that you feel the magic, and you feel that enchanted aspect of life. As I said earlier, usually this happens randomly, by accident, very hard to initiate, you know. Especially if you're having a difficult day, you can't just turn on the switch and say, oh, I'm going to touch something I'm going to touch the infinity. But we try in different ways. Well, Yom Kippur is a full day of exposure to such an experience. So the challenge is, how do we find ways to describe that pure part of ourselves that we can hold on to, that you can know it's very, very clearly you? I just recently, and just a few days ago, someone wrote me a very beautiful note wishing me a Happy New Year. And the person told me that for years I wanted to write to you how your book has changed my life, toward a meaningful life. And this person writes to me that they have dedicated their life to doing something, a service, public service. And I saw from the person's commitment, the way they were writing, this individual's writing to me, it was like a person who completely dedicated their life to helping other people. Now, I don't know who this is because it's just an email. I never met this person. But I wrote back to him. I said, I commend you for recognizing and realizing that the calling and mission, there's no greater mission, God's mission in life, to know that you're here for service to other people. And when I wrote it, and when I heard what he said, I realized, that is like a resonating element. Because what has happened to us, to many of us, as we grow older, we have the need to survive. And to survive, we've convinced ourselves, or we're being constantly brainwashed, to think that to survive, you need to hoard. You need to acquire. You need to take. You need to protect yourself. People who have dedicated their lives to others, that doesn't mean they don't have a need for survival, but there's something about their commitment that transcends their own immediate needs, the here and now. And it's the rarity. Most of us don't do that. That is an example, in my mind, of a pure experience. Now, we all have tastes of it. And I'm specifically saying it in a pretty, aggressive way. You really have to look at your whole life. You may be spending your life and thinking that you're doing things that are making you happy and successful and stuff like that. And it may be completely nothing to do with who you are in your purest form. So you may argue, okay, fine, as long as I'm doing fine, what do I really care? Well, if you don't care, I definitely don't care. It's not, if you don't care about it. But you start caring when things don't work. And then you can't just patch it up with a Band-Aid. So in other words, we can definitely live a life addicted and completely consumed with a whole new set of values or a set of personality that's not who you really are. And you can make it, you can manage. But when, God forbid, crisis strikes, or when suddenly you have a wake-up call, or something else shakes it up, then you realize it's not so simple. I know people who are perfectly happy. They're 40, 45 years old, and they figured out how to maneuver their lives without necessarily a commitment in relationships. Now, I'm not going to be the one that tells them how they may look happy, they may even feel happy. What's going on the unconscious level? How will they be in 10 years from now, 5 years from now? But look, it's not my job to make people feel miserable. I have sinned in that direction, I must tell you. But it was never really intentional. A few times it's been intentional, but mostly it just happens. But everybody's got their life. And the question really comes down to this. To me, the biggest Yom Kippur question is what you do with your life. How consistent is it with who you really are? Now, if you're courageous enough and strong enough to ask that question, God bless you. Most people, that's a big, hard question to ask. People don't want to find out that I'm pretty far away from where I should be. It's just too painful. Even though it's the beginning of any type of salvation. I don't know about you, I'm getting hot in here. Maybe it's the topic. So, do you mind, can you tell Velvet to just... So, as they say in Hebrew, they say, Megala tefach mechaset tefachayim, you reveal 1 inch and you conceal 2. I just said that for good measure, and do with it as you wish. If you choose to erase that from your memories, what I just said the last 2 minutes, you can, if it makes you more comfortable. If you want to address it, then I'm sure if you apply yourself, you can. Because I see it really not about negative or critique, it's about getting back on course. Because there's nothing more powerful and more beautiful than reconnecting to the pure you. So, to sum up what I've said so far is this, that each of us has that pure dimension, and there are ways to describe it. There are things that will resonate when you hear it. As I said, it could be through song and music, it could be through stories, it could be through life experiences, and it could be through seeing sometimes something that arouses or, in a sense, stimulates your compassion, your empathy, your feelings about others. There are many, many ways that you can awaken that part of us. The preparation to Yom Kippur is about finding ways to access that. I know it may sound self-serving when I talk about my grandchildren but I don't talk about them just because I love them. I'm sure everyone loves their children and grandchildren, and those that need to be blessed with that should be blessed this year. But I also, because to me, it's not about that, it's just also because I do speak publicly and I write, I find it as a real, sincere, and living metaphor for a lot of these ideas. To me, children are a gift, or any child, whatever proximity they are to you. A child is a blessing. God could have created us like He did Adam and Eve. The Medrash says that Adam and Eve were created 20 years old. They never experienced the enchantment of childhood. Or maybe they did in a certain way, but hey, they ate from the tree of knowledge pretty fast, so that was that same day. Even though that day probably, a lot of activity happened on that initial Rosh Hashanah. But God created a mature universe. So if you ask the proverbial question, the Jewish answer to the proverbial question, what came first, the chicken or the egg? So the Jewish answer. Both. They were both there. When Adam and Eve were placed in the Garden of Eden, they had a chicken and an egg, and large trees and small trees and seeds in the ground, and stars in the heavens, which means could have been millions of miles or light years away. They were in a mature, ready-made universe to start working, because there was a purpose. But after that, every child since then has been born a newborn. So you can ask the philosophical question, why didn't God create us all as adults? Just pop out into the world, within a day, ready to get a job, and start providing for yourself and for others. Why do we need all this downtime and all the efforts placed into educating children and tsar gidul bonim, which is the pain and the difficulties of bringing up a child, and the concerns and the worries? Why isn't everybody just born mature, like Adam and Eve, thrust into the world, go do something with your life, give, instead of, as I said, all the challenges of child. But then we would not have had an example of purity, of innocence. Then we would never have the ability to be reborn through our children. So there's a prophecy at the end of the book of Malachi, the prophet. He says, "V'heishiv leivavis al bonim, al yidei bonim." It means the hearts of the parents will return through their children, which is a very powerful statement. Children can bring us back to our own pure place. Now, children obviously could be biological. They could also be students. It could be people who, in some way, are your offspring. It says, "Ela tel desein shel tzaddikim, amaisim tovim." The children of tzaddikim are good deeds. My peirim mitzvahs, sometimes it says in the Talmud. Their fruits are like mitzvahs. So we all bear fruit. And it's the fruit that we bear that can give us back something that we can't give, that more than we give it. It gives us the experience of renewal. When you bear fruit, when you teach someone something, an idea that you've known for many years, and you see their excitement of hearing something new, you can experience renewal through that. This has happened to me so many times as a writer. Someone writes back to you that this particular line has touched you. I may have written it 20 years ago, 5 years, and I go back and I experience not only I experience in a way I never would have experienced on my own. This person taught me how to see it in a different way. And I've always talked the story about that. I always tell about that St. Louis woman. The line, "Birth is God saying you matter." So yes, I wrote it in the book, but until I heard what it meant to her, how it changed her life, saved her life, in a very abusive home, she came to realize that she matters because God put her here. It taught me a whole new dimension of that same line that I've read many times, comes from the Torah and so on. So we can experience renewal, sometimes not necessarily when we self-generate, but when we give, we share. And then you get the feedback. And you see the experience. And it's not just, as I said, it's not just going back to what you had, sometimes something much deeper and more profound than you would have ever experienced it on your own. So that's children in the broader sense of the word, not necessarily biological, physical children. We all can experience that. So v'heishiv leivavis al bonim al yidei bonim. That our offspring, our fruits of our labor, the things, what we share, what we inspire in others, can bring us back some complete newness. That's why you'll find great teachers, no matter how old they got, they always remain good teachers. Teachers not just when they were in school or actually actively teaching. It was a constant transmission of something that they gave off. And they could be 90 years old and still get it back and have the same renewal effect. It could probably add a few years to a person's life to just experience that. Because you see the feedback, you see the rebounding effect, what Hasidic literature calls Or Chayzer. The moon, technically just a reflection of the sun. But what the moon gives us is much more deeper than the sunlight. Moonlight has its own mystique, its own romance, has its own power, even though it's just a reflection. But it's not like a mirror image. When you look at it, you just see the sun in the mirror. It adds a whole personality to this reflection. And it's used as a metaphor to students, to any type of feedback, to any type of rebounding effect, that when you give, what comes back to you. So in that sense, sometimes when we look at, if you're looking to find that pure place in yourself, why don't you share something with someone and you see how they experience purity, and suddenly it can remind you. I can't tell you how many times this has happened to me. I am maybe jaded as much as anyone in this world. But when you are teaching and you write, and you're impacting others, you have no choice, in a good way, because what you get this feedback that brings you back to pure places where you were once and maybe you may have forgotten. So that's another way of experiencing the Yom Kippur magic, the Yom Kippur purity. I'm just suggesting different ways that can touch us. So when I look at my grandchildren, I observe them. Besides the love as a grandfather and all that, they're as I said, in my proximity, so I can observe and study. If it was other children, I would do the same. And I always see it when I see children. And pause. Why don't you pause? Children are ignored in this world. We're so busy with so many things, we don't notice them. But next time you see a little child, doesn't have to be your own, doesn't even have to be a relative. Observe how they behave, and you'll see yourself in a pure form. Just the way they react to things. Now, obviously, the younger, the better, because as we get older, they become like us, and that's not what you're looking for. And you see it how they react to things, how they play, how fast anger wears off. So many other things, the lack of pettiness. Yes, I understand we'll say, well, they're immature, they cry, and they could be nagging and stuff like that. But that is not what I'm talking about. That's, to me, that's externals. I'm talking about the essential elements of how they react to things. The inquisitiveness, the enchantment, the excitement about things. And smallest little things. They see the extraordinary in the ordinary. And if there's any description of what purity is, that's what purity is all about. And we have the power to access it. Now, one of our enemies is that we don't like to stand out and be alone, especially if you think you're losing out. I remember years ago, how many years ago is it now? Almost like 20 years ago. And I came up with this crazy idea. Some of you know I have moments of insanity, sometimes more than moments. But and I thought of this thing called I never really developed it, but it was an idea that I just shared with a few friends, and I tried it out in a small, controlled setting. It just wasn't big enough to make an impact, that setting. And that was like a call for a global day of goodness. Okay? Now, there's 6 billion people on this planet. After all, there are only 6 billion. They're like 6 billion individuals like us. So if you can affect 10 people, you can affect 1,000, you can affect 1 million, you can affect 6 billion. If you're able to reach them all. And a day where everybody would, like, they have the Smoke Out America Day, whatever they call it, Smoke Out, like everybody stops smoking for a day. I don't know if it works or it doesn't work, but they have these days. Like a day where people would, and I'm not being naive or just idealistic, but hear me out before you criticize what I'm going to say. A day where everybody would make a commitment to be giving and not selfish for that day. And even criminals, call upon them to take a day off. 1 day only. And I thought, what if some experiment would be take hold? You could actually get everybody on earth to do that. Or a large number, a critical mass. Individually, none of us, like in this room here, if we made such a decision, I'm sure everyone here would go along with it. If we made a decision a certain day we're going to do it, as long as it's only one day, obviously. Most of us would stick to it. Maybe maybe you like it and you stick for 2 days. But let's say it's an argument for one day. What's the problem? It's not just the problem of how many numbers of people we can reach. Assuming you can reach. I submit that the problem is that most people will be ready to do it, but they want to stand by the door to make sure nobody else runs to the cookie jar first. Because they won't trust anyone else. They'll say, you know what, I'll be doing it, but what about everybody else? If I really knew, then everybody else was also not being greedy that day and taking advantage of the moment, it's one thing. In other words, I would say, kol ha-poisel b'mumei poisel, which means, since you don't trust yourself, you don't trust anyone else. So you don't really trust that everyone's going to stick to it. We're not going to leave the banks open for a day because there are going to be some people who are going to cheat. Just use the example. So if you do that type of attitude, it requires trust. So really, if you really analyze it, if that's really the problem, then really it comes down to our own projections, like a vicious cycle of the blind leading the blind. And in a sense, we've all written that negative script. You see, the great men and women of history never thought this way. They didn't care about 6 billion. They cared about themselves. And even if no one else was doing it, they still did it. As I said, contrarian. They didn't do it because it was popular. And that's the big challenge. The big challenge to reach a pure place inside of yourself is, it doesn't work in this world. No one else is pure. How am I going to, if I was able to connect to my pure space, what am I going to do with it? I go to work the next day after Yom Kippur. I'm going to meet a lot of people that are not so pure. And then what? So even if you don't reveal your secret, it's still, you stand out. No one else is doing it. And it starts wearing us down. So these I'm just describing some of the challenges, why it's not so easy. But it still doesn't mean it's not real. It just means that we are trapped. It's a sad commentary in our lives that we're so dependent on other people's attitudes and we are such social creatures. I mean, it's a beautiful thing on one hand that we connect that way, but it's terrible when we all contaminate each other. In other words, each individually here we're ready to go to a place like that, but together we can't because we just don't trust it. That's a pretty, what can I say, twisted irony. So we have this Yom Kippur upon us, and it calls us not necessarily to look at anyone else. It's one day, and it's a day that asks us to connect to your Holy of Holies, to your purest place. So when we experience Yom Kippur, and many people look at it the stereotypical fashion, how does everything I've been saying here tonight fit in with all the confessions and the sins and the guilt and the remorse and regrets that we keep repeating time and again Yom Kippur? So I think I shared with you the mashal, the metaphor from the Baal Shem Tov. He came into a synagogue once, and he always, as I said, he always had issues with synagogues. The classic one where he came to a synagogue and he ran out saying it was too packed, there was no room. And they said to him, "What do you mean? It says the place is empty." So he said, "No, you understand prayers. It says in the Zohar that a prayer, like parcha le'elo, cannot soar like a bird without wings. And the wings of prayer is ava and yira. Ava is love and yira is awe." And he went in there and the prayers were all like grounded birds, because they were just saying hollow prayers. So they were all grounded, and he says the room was so full with prayers you couldn't breathe. Instead of them flying and soaring where they should be going, they were just grounded in the shul. So someone sarcastically, when I told the story somewhere, said to me, "Well, my synagogue, don't worry about it. We have no hollow prayers and no wings altogether, so it's completely empty." Okay, that's some consolation. So the story goes, he once went into a shul on Yom Kippur, and as he walks in, he hears the chazan, the cantor, carrying on this cheerful melody on Yom Kippur. So he was very wondering which part of the prayer was he saying. So there's a beautiful part, for example, that's very cheerful and upbeat. In the Avodah, in the Musaf, when we talk about the Kohen Gadol, the high priest comes out after from the Holy of Holies. There's a whole beautiful prayer, Mara Kohen, the visage of the Kohen, what he looked like a rainbow in heaven, like a light bolt in the sky. You know, kinds of different metaphors to show so that's a pretty upbeat. There are also other prayers that are that you can have a cheerful song. But here he was singing the Simchas Torah song, and he looks closely. The Baal Shem Tov sees that the Chazan is saying Al Chet. Al Chet is the long confession that we repeat many times over in Yom Kippur, in every prayer except the last, where we confess our sins. Al Chet. Al Chet for this, Al Chet for that. You'll read it yourself, you'll see what it's like. It's not exactly cheerful content. And as a matter of fact, like a fellow told me, went to shul last year, Yom Kippur, he said when he started reading Al Chet, he says there are a lot of sins there I never thought of. This is quite interesting. It gave me a lot of ideas. Planted many ideas in my mind, you know. There's even Al Chet that says, Al Chet shechatana b'yetzer hara, which says, you know, I confess for the sin that I did with my yetzer hara. So the Shalah asks, every sin is with your yetzer hara, with your evil inclination. What is it? She says there are sins that even your yetzer hara didn't think of doing, and you instigated to do it. So there's even that. So here this Chazan is carrying on this cheerful melody. The Baal Shem Tov after davening goes over to him and says, you know, I thank you, commend you for your beautiful davening, but can you explain to me what exactly did you see in Al Chet that was so cheerful? You know, what was like so upbeat? So the Chazan in his simplicity said, very simple. In the palace of the king there are many different jobs. There are people who serve the food. There are people who deliver the mail. There are people who bring the king's crown and garments to him. There are the tailors. There are people who are the secretaries that arrange for meetings, and so on and so on. People who write up the edicts and laws. And then there's a janitor. There's the guy who cleans up the palace. He says, that's my job as the Chazan. So when I'm cleaning the palace, I'm trying to clean up the dust through saying all these Al Chets, I'm not thinking about the dust. I'm thinking about how beautiful the palace is. So I'm singing. I'm also one of the employees here. I'm also in this palace. As a matter of fact, I'm helping make the palace even more beautiful. Baal Shem Tov heard that. That became like a part of the Baal Shem Tov's doctrine, Chassidus. It doesn't minimize our crimes or our sins or transgressions and iniquities and indiscretions and so on and so forth. But it puts it into context. Why should anybody really be bothered if you did something wrong? It's only someone that loves you that would be bothered. It's only if there's beauty where you would be bothered if something was not that perfect. In a place of no beauty, in a place of a wasteland, no one would be bothered if things are not very nice there. That's the way it's meant to be. It's in a beautiful place where every blemish and every inconsistency stands out. The Talmud says, Ravav al beged shel Talmid Chacham, on the garment of a scholar, even a Ravav, a small piece of dust, or small insect, is significant. You know, Jigan, the Yiddish linguist and comedian, said it goes like this: Einstein's theory of relativity. So one Jew asks another, he says, so what he won a Nobel Prize for it? Yeah. What's so big about the theory of relativity? He said, let me tell you. Theory of relativity goes like this: 3 hairs on your head is not much, but 3 hairs in the soup. You know, so when a piece of dust is on your eyeball, it's not like a piece of dust on your finger, because the eyeball is so sensitive. So every small dust is irritating. So the more beautiful something is, the more the blemish matters. The more love there is, the more sensitive we are when we're hurt. If you didn't care, you're indifferent, and you didn't care about another person, who cares how they behave? Now, I'm not talking about those of us that are just vindictive or just like to see others fail, or they call schadenfreude, nicht verginnen, not to, you just can't stand when someone else is happy. I'm talking about when you really care, there's going to be pain if something isn't working. So Yom Kippur is a place you enter in the Holy of Holies. When the high priest would go in, they would tie him up with ropes, because he was entering the purest place on earth. And even one blemish in his life would cause him to die in the Holy of Holies. So they would tie up the Kohen Gadol with ropes, so just in case no one else could enter, they would have to pull him out. Rabbi Yochanan Kohen Gadol, the high priest, 80 years. Well, he was 80 years old. Can't say 80, but for many, many years, probably over 60 years, that he entered into the Holy of Holies. It's pretty amazing that he went without a blemish. So when we enter our Holy of Holies, there's two things going on. On one hand, yes, it's a very, very beautiful, pure place, but also on the other hand, a pure place also does not tolerate negative stuff that easily. So it's also a very sensitive place. So God forbid, when you in surgery, in a surgical place, in a what do they call it? OR. Okay, OR. Okay, operating room, where they perform surgery, especially on internal organs, it has to be highly sterilized. Because when you open those internal organs where it's very sensitive, the bacteria, infections gather. They gather where there's more strength, where there's more power. As it is, as a human body, we have our outer layers, we have the epidermis, we have our hair, we have our skin. We have many things that protect and filter and don't allow infections to enter. So the more sensitive something is, the more powerful it is, the way Jewish Judaism puts it, the more it's prone to every blemish makes a difference. And that's why Yom Kippur also has these al-chetz, because it's not about focusing on the negative, it's that now you're in a pure place, now every little thing matters, and everything has to be accounted for. Whereas in a regular day, even though we have to be accountable, it's not quite that same type of level of sensitivity. And you see it with children too. Young children, because they're so fragile and vulnerable, a small blemish can make a big difference. An adult has tools to protect themselves. That's why child abuse, for instance, is so deeply wounding, much more than an adult can protect. A child has no protection. A child is defenseless. So a child absorbs, like the example of a warm ball of wax, that everything that happens to a child is engraved in the child's psyche, and as the wax hardens, it becomes part of that personality. Once the wax is hard, it's not as easy to penetrate, not as easy to harm a person, because you have your defenses, you have your mechanisms, you have the hard skin, the tough skin that you have that allows you to protect yourself. So Yom Kippur has these two sides, but when you enter into a place that's pure, there's nothing to be concerned about because you're going to a pure place. So we have that opportunity now in the next few days to prepare ourselves for this special day and prepare ourselves in a way where we can assume the mindset of what it's like, what our purest identity looks like. And there are many ways you can do that, as I said. I gave many examples, and as well as observing children. Children is the closest approximation of what you're like in a pure form. Of course, the greatest beauty is that you can have all the qualities of adult life, the seasoning, experience, knowledge, but still maintain that innocence, the pure innocence. I've seen in my life, not many, but the few rare people that had those elements. It's probably the most powerful thing to see. An adult that's not naive and not stupid and understands life and has seen pain and still has not lost hope and still has that type of innocent connection. And when you see that, you can see that it's possible, it's doable to maintain both of them, to be able to maintain that innocence even while you're navigating a difficult world. So each of us has that ability, has that opportunity. And I want to wish everybody here, since Yom Kippur is coming, the ability to be able to connect to that place. Find and discover within yourself that the child within. And I've mentioned this exercise in the past. It wouldn't hurt, perhaps, to dig up a picture of yourself as a young child and look at it, stare at it a little, and let it stare back to you, at you. And then see if you can reconnect, acquaint yourself with that part of yourself. I absolutely believe it's possible. To use the prayers of Yom Kippur, the songs of Yom Kippur, the whole mood is conducive for this, to meet the pure you. It's a pretty So imagine someone scheduled a meeting like that. I guess we'd be somewhat tentative initially to meet a part of yourself that's waiting anxiously to meet you, what you've become. So what you've become is going to meet where you came from, what you've been. So it can be somewhat disconcerting initially, but I would also see it as a pretty interesting reunion. And that's the opportunity that we're given on Yom Kippur, the ability to enter the Holy of Holies, that pure, pure place. I've seen in people's lives, I would say many, many lives, glimpses of those moments. So I no doubt that it's not completely buried under the surface. It's those moments of nobility, moments of sensitivity, when you're proud of yourself, really proud. And usually you're proud of yourself not when you're busy taking, it's when you're usually giving. So we have two sides to us, as I said earlier. There's the side that is busy surviving and fighting and struggling, make ends meet. But there's another side of us, those moments when you do that small little act, where you bend down to a child, you stretch out your hand to a needy person. Those little acts that don't necessarily get awards. There's no dramatic fireworks. Those small little things that major magic can happen. Every one of us has moments like that. And you'll even see that at times you behave that way, and sometimes the same situation and you don't behave that way. Because we're moody, and we live in a world where sometimes the ups and downs of life take over. One day you could walk by and see a homeless person in the street and cry for the person and help them in some way. Another day you say, what are you doing in the street? Why doesn't someone take this person off the street and put him away somewhere? The same person can have both feelings. But the fact of the matter is we always retain a certain purity. And the key thing is to initiate it, not wait just for that moment when you happen to be a little sensitive and out of your control. To control it. To make an effort to go out of your way to be kinder and gentler. So maybe that's also an exercise that each of us can try to do. In these days before Yom Kippur, we go out of our way to look if we've hurt anybody. And I don't just mean lip service forgiveness, but actually try to mend something. We go out of our way to add in charity, in tzedakah, especially in these 10 days. Because that type of behavior awakens, ignites that pure part inside yourself. And God reciprocates in kind, that the purest part of God also is revealed. Because that's the second half of the coin, that God too, throughout the year, is manifest in many garments, many layers. So when we open our pure essence, the pure essence from above also opens up. And it's reciprocal, and it goes back and forth. That's ultimately the total fusion of heaven and earth. So I wish upon all of us to use this Yom Kippur to the fullest sense of the word. If anybody needs help with finding a good Yom Kippur place, please, you can reach to me. Velvel will be able to help you. I actually am leading a service. I did it in Manhattan the last few years, but doing it now in Brooklyn, Crown Heights. Meanwhile, until we reawaken different opportunities. There'll be one here as well, right? But please don't hesitate if you need any assistance in this regard to find a Yechida experience. And with that being said, I'd like to wish everyone again a Gemar Chesima Tova, a good gebenched year to everyone. And the more you open yourself up, the more you invest, the more will return. For those of us that will say Yizkor on Yom Kippur, Yom Kippur, we say Yizkor several times a year, but Yom Kippur has a special power because it's a day of the soul. So it's obviously, during Yizkor, we also commit to charity, even though it's Yom Kippur, and even though it's a day that's not material, because it's a way of channeling and connecting heaven and earth, of perpetuating the legacy of our loved ones. So those who will be saying Yizkor, keep that in mind. It's a special moment to connect to those that came before us. In my case, it's my father. My mother, may she be well in the many years. And those of you that have parents, may they be healthy and make sure you walk out of shul during Yizkor. That's the custom. And finally, just on a practical level, tomorrow night Philip will be giving his Pre-Yom Kippur class. Philip, right over there. And the next 2 weeks, because of the holiday, we won't be having a class, a physical class. There'll be a spiritual class, which is hard to broadcast online. But because next Wednesday night will be Sukkot, and the following Wednesday night will be Shmini Atzeret, and going into Simchas Torah. But following that, we definitely will start a brand new year, fresh, renewed, pure, innocent. And as a matter of fact, it says Sukkot, when we take the 4 species, it says we take the 4 species, so the Medrash says, what's Yom Harishon, the first day? So of course the first day of Sukkot, but the Medrash adds an interpretation as the first day of your life, in a way. Rishon l'cheshbon avonos, it says. Because since Yom Kippur were pure, and the 4 days after Yom Kippur was busy gathering and finding these species, and go check it out in every chicken market before Yom Kippur, and then the esrog markets after Yom Kippur. So we're so busy with that, the Medrash basically says we have no time to sin. I hope that we live up to that. So Sukkot begins that whole new channeling, and if you keep the joy going, maybe you can push it off till after Shabbos Bereshis. But we'll be back here, and if you get the emails, we'll announce everything so you'll know exactly the dates. And if you don't, please give us your email address as well. And what should I say? From my heart to yours, it should be a very blessed year for everyone here in a very revealed way. B'teiv hanirav hanigla, in health and parnasa, meaning livelihood, b'harchava, in full abundance, beyond your expectations. And those of you that have to find your soulmate, may this be the year we dance at your wedding. And we have here my favorite couple that give us all hope, renewed hope. Really, a miracle right here in our times. Mark, Mark and Rebecca Belinsky. Seriously, why is that funny? Look at their faces; they look fresh, like newborns. Everything is new, and God shall bless you. Have a very happy marriage, blessed with healthy children, and the same for everyone here that has to find their particular soulmate, and blessed with your children, blessed with all the blessings of nachas from each other, and whatever area in your life that you need, may the channels all open up, and impediments melt away, and the most seamless and easiest way to access all our blessings in a year of life, and health, and blessings in abundance, materially and spiritually. And it's an honor as the year begins to be part of your life, be part of your journey, and I hope you feel the same. So thank you very much.